And now we're going to start the last chapter. Aren't you so glad you made it this far? The last chapter on the reproductive systems. So, we'll start with the male reproductive system. Brief overview of the organs. You have the testes. Then there's a whole system of ducts, including the epididymis, vas deferens, ejaculatory ducts, and urethra. Then there's accessory sex glands, like the seminal vesicles, the prostate, the bulbourethral glands, which are also called the Cowper's glands. And then there's the supporting structures of the scrotum and the penis. So here you can see a sagittal section showing all of these structures I just reviewed. We'll start down here in the scrotum. The scrotum, of course, is just the external sac housing the testes, which is the circular structure. You have this kind of cup or mitt almost going around the testes. That's the epididymis. The tube coming up and out of the scrotum is your vas deferens, also known as the ductus deferens. Some textbooks or websites refer to it as the ductus deferens. It's the same structure, taking all of the sperm out of the testes. Notice where it goes. It goes up in the abdominal cavity, around behind the bladder, all the way back here. It meets up with various secretions from the seminal vesicles, which are going to provide nutrients and things like that for the sperm. Then there is the special ejaculatory duct carrying that sperm into the urethra. Sperm doesn't actually enter the urethra until ejaculation occurs, so this ejaculatory duct kind of is like the holding pen for the semen before it's released. You have the prostate here, which is this large structure. It looks like it's divided, but it's not. The urethra actually cuts through the prostate itself. The prostate gives a milky, kind of acidic secretion to help nourish the sperm as well. And then the bulbourethral glands here, you can see having a secretion going into the urethra as well. This is more of a kind of a washing fluid. This is the fluid that comes out before ejaculation occurs. This fluid goes down the urethra to wash out any urine that may be there, because urine is a different pH than semen, and if sperm come in contact with urine, they'll probably die. You also have the penis, which is itself made of a few different types of tissues. There's the spongioerectile tissue, which is called the corpora cavernosa, and there's also the corpus spongiosum. The urethra, of course, passes through the penis. And then you have the glans penis, which is the very end, and the foreskin, which is the extra skin that covers the very tip of the penis, kind of hiding the opening, if you will, from the outside world. So let's talk about the scrotum. This is, of course, the sac that contains the testes, found outside the body's core, so that those sperm can actually be maintained at a slightly colder body temperature. It's made of loose skin, superficial fascia, as well as smooth muscle, which you may know that it's muscle if you've ever seen a scrotum kind of scrunch up on itself. Those muscles are contracting, pulling the testes back in, perhaps on a cold day. It keeps the sperm at optimal temperature. As I mentioned, the body core temperature is actually too high for sperm. It can harm the sperm and cause infertility, so the scrotal sacs are there to help the sperm survive. The testes themselves are a pair of oval glands. This is where sperm is made. It also secretes testosterone, that hormone that fuels the development of male sexual characteristics as well as the development of sperm. So the anatomy of the testes itself, the testes is made of lots and lots and lots of tubules. All of these tubules here kind of combine. They're called seminiferous tubules. They all combine and lead to common ducts, which eventually lead to this epididymis structure, and then to the vas deferens or ductus deferens, which takes the sperm out of the testes. You don't need to be familiar with all of these smaller compartments of the testes. Their Sertoli cells are the special support cells. These are going to support and protect the sperm-making cells. They can also phagocytize any kind of faulty sperm cells in there. And this is kind of an interesting concept. So this structure here is representing a tubule. This is part of the wall of one of these seminiferous tubules. And as these special spermatogonium cells migrate through the walls of this tube, meiosis is occurring. This is when you get your primary spermatocyte and secondary spermatocyte, and eventually sperm formation, spermatozoa formation. And you can see them here, and they literally are released into the lumen and then swim on their merry little way to the epididymis and then up the vas deferens. So the epididymis is the tightly coiled structures. That's where sperm continue their maturation. The vas deferens is where sperm is stored, and it's more of a tube structure taking the sperm out of the epididymis. The penis itself is going to deliver the sperm into the female reproductive tract. The spongy tissue is going to fill with blood, and it becomes stiff and erect so that the penis can be inserted into the vagina. The sperm is going to travel through peristalsis. It's actually a peristolic movement through the vas deferens into the ejaculatory duct to the urethra. Then it's mixed with various accessory gland structures from the prostate, and as well as the seminal vesicles, the bulbourethral gland, etc., so that it can form semen. So let's talk about some of these accessory glands. You have the prostate, which is going to assist in kind of secreting an acidic fluid to help that semen coagulate and kind of clump together. The seminal vesicles secrete an alkaline or basic solution that's going to help to neutralize the vagina, as well as has fructose for sperm to be able to create ATP from. It's also going to help that sperm become more motile and as well as live a little bit longer. Semen is going to coagulate better because of these viscous-like secretions. The bulbourethral glands are going to secrete an alkaline fluid to neutralize any urine that may be in the urethra. So ejaculation, of course, is the reflex kind of expelling the semen from the penis, and semen itself is the mixture of sperm and gland secretions. So the summary of male reproductive system functions include the fact that the testes produce the sperm and testosterone. There's a duct system that's transporting, storing, and assisting with the maturation of sperm. There's accessory glands to secrete the majority of the liquid portion of the sperm, and the penis has that urethral portion that's a common passageway for semen as well as urine. The testis itself is covered with a dense fibrous capsule, and then it's divided into those lobules. There's 200 to 300 of those lobules per testes, and each lobule has 1 to 3 tubules within it. So lots and lots of tubules making lots and lots of sperm within the testes. Those seminiferous tubules are lined with those spermatogenic cells, as I showed you. The spermatogonia are the special stem cells that will eventually make sperm. They mature into primary, secondary spermatocytes, spermatids, then eventually sperm cells. At each stage of maturation, that layer is closer and closer to the lumen of the tubule. Once the sperm are mature sperm cells, they are released into the seminiferous tubules and travel to the ejaculatory duct. There's special Sertoli cells within the seminiferous tubules to help support and nourish and protect, as well as phagocytize any of the defunct spermatogenic cells. They also help to secrete fluid for sperm transport, and they release a hormone called inhibin to help regulate sperm production. The Leydig cells secrete testosterone, which is an androgen hormone promoting the development of secondary sex characteristics in males, as well as promoting sex drive. The process of spermatogenesis produces 300 million sperm per day. They do not survive more than 48 hours in the female reproductive tract. That number varies depending on your source. Some sources will say 72 hours. Some sources will say up to a week. You should always be on the safe side and use protection even if you're not sure. But this book is saying 48 hours. The truth is it varies depending on the female's internal environment. Sperm production has those two steps. As I mentioned, there's meiosis, which is going to produce those sex cells, and then spermiogenesis, which is the final step where those sperm are reshaped to form that ovoid cell that has a flagella. So the sperm themselves have two major parts. You have the head, which has a special area called an acrosome, which has special enzymes to help the sperm kind of break into the egg. And then there's the tail, which has a neck, a middle piece, a principal piece, and an end piece. Ultimately, the function of the tail is to create ATP and move that cell forward. Here you can see this idea of spermatogenesis, this kind of lining of the seminiferous tubule. You have the spermatogonium cells producing primary and secondary spermatocytes, producing spermatotids, eventually going through spermiogenesis to form sperm cells that are released into the seminiferous tubule, travel to the vas deferens. If we look closer at the anatomy of a sperm, the acrosome is kind of like the little hat on the sperm cell. The nucleus, of course, is containing the DNA, and then within this mid piece, you have lots and lots of mitochondria to produce ATP so that this tail can whip around and propel that sperm towards the egg. This animation here goes through spermatogenesis. Let's talk about the pathway of sperm, although I've kind of gone over it already. We'll recap it. Sperm's made in the testes, goes into the lumen of the seminiferous tubules, goes into the epididymis. Here it's going to spend up to 2 weeks. Then it can go into the vas deferens, where they're still viable for months and months. So in other words, if ejaculation does not occur within hours or minutes or days even, the sperm can hang out inside the vas deferens for months. The sperm is then propelled through the urethra during sexual arousal, through the ejaculatory duct. Once it goes through the ejaculatory duct, it's going to mix with secretions from the seminal vesicles, prostate, and bulbourethral glands, and then that semen, which is the mixture of the fluid component and the sperm, is going to leave the penis. Here you see the pathway, as I reviewed earlier, made in the testes, stored in the epididymis, goes to the vas deferens, can be stored here for months, collects lots of secretions from prostate, seminal vesicle, and bulbourethra, and then out the urethra, out the tip of the penis. Semen itself varies in volume per ejaculation, usually between 50 to 150 million sperm per milliliter is produced, and usually it's 2.5 to 5 milliliters of sperm being released per ejaculation. It's under 20 million sperm is not enough to fertilize an egg, so it's only a small fraction are going to reach the egg. So 20 million sperm or less is considered an infertility risk. An alkaline pH of 7.2 to 7.7. It has a milky white color, kind of a sticky texture because of fructose. There's also an antimicrobial substance that's going to help destroy or kill any of the bacteria that it may come in contact with in the female reproductive tract. We've mentioned testosterone. Testosterone is a type of hormone called an androgen. Comes in a couple different varieties. Dihydrotestosterone, or DHT, is another version. They're both regulated by LH and FSH coming from the anterior pituitary gland. Ultimately, the effects of these androgens, they have effects on prenatal development. The testosterone in prenatal is going to signal the descent of the testes and the male reproductive system to develop. DHT is going to fuel the development of those external genitals. The development of male sexual characteristics is all under the fuel of testosterone. Development of sex organs after puberty, or during puberty, I should say, stimulating the sexual characteristics like increased hair growth, enlargement of larynx, oil secretion, skeletal muscular developments, wider shoulders, narrow hips, etc., all due to testosterone. The development of sexual function in males is going to be brought on by their sexual behavior as well as spermatogenesis. And it's also responsible for sex drives in males and in females. It can also stimulate anabolism, building proteins, hormones. These androgen hormones are going to stimulate protein synthesis, leading to heavier bones, stronger muscle mass in men compared to females. So let's talk about more hormone regulation in the male reproductive tract. FSH we mentioned, and testosterone. Those are the two hormones that are going to stimulate spermatogenesis. Once you have the appropriate level of spermatogenesis occurring, in other words, you've made enough sperm, you don't need to make any more, it's just sitting there waiting, inhibin is going to be released by those Sertoli cells, and that's going to inhibit FSH from being released. So it's a negative feedback system. Here you see the testosterone being created here. I'm trying to find where the sperm. Leydig cells are secreting testosterone. You have your DHT here for male pattern development before birth. You have your Sertoli cells secreting that androgen binding protein, ABP. All of that is going to lead to the development of male sexual characteristics. This animation here goes through hormonal control in the male reproductive system. Let's stop here for part 1.